enjoying cupcakes. But as they're enjoying cupcakes, I want to ask the Schulmans, how was your trip to the holy sites of the Inca, the Machu Picchu trip? How was that?
Absolutely. It was an incredible experience. Pictures do not do it justice. Experiencing it live it's magical. It's to be able to absorb history, archaeology, culture, the Inca Indians. Some of the rumors may or may not. There's some mystery there. The whole country is 33 million people. The city of Lima is the capital is 12 million people. They've got so over a third of the population in the city of Lima. Lima, like Israel, is on the coast of the ocean, the Mediterranean Sea for Israel, the Pacific Ocean for Lima. It is a desert. They get less than 3 inches of rain a year. It's cloudy all the time, but it doesn't rain there. It's unique. It's special. It was well worth the experience, the trip. And the people treated us well. All of the people. It's a friendly country. There is a lot of very unusual attributes to Peru, to Sacred Valley, to Machu Picchu, to Cusco. The cities, the people, it's magnificent.
Wow. And you flew directly into
Lima. We flew
into
down. There are flights from LAX. There are flights from Miami to Lima, and then Lima we flew local to Cusco in the center of the country, and then we hired a driver to take us up to Sacred Valley. And Sacred Valley, we took a train to get to Machu Picchu via a bus. So
Wow.
a driver, a train, and a bus to get to the mountain, and then we walked partway up the mountain to see the ruins of Machu Picchu. It's incredible what they accomplished.
How high did you go?
Lima is sea level. Cusco is 11,000 feet. Sacred Valley was 12,000, or Machu Picchu was 12,000. Between 11 and 12,000.
How was the elevation? Did it get affected at all?
Oh yeah, it does affect you, and it's interesting to be able to have cocoa leaves, and you can either have cocoa tea or just chew on cocoa leaves, and it is a miracle. It's an instantaneous relief from hypoxia and altitude. You have to be careful with it only in the morning, because if you chew on the cocoa leaves the late afternoon or evening, you won't sleep.
Yeah, no kidding. 1
And then you
hour.
become a music producer in Hollywood too.
Within about 1 hour after we landed.
What was that?
Within about 1 hour after we landed.
I can't hear you, Cheryl.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Within about 1 hour after we landed in Cusco, I started absolutely cratering and had two small cups of this coca leaf tea. And it was, as David said, absolutely instant. I was just perfect.
Huh. Interesting. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So, wow. And now Joyce is enjoying some chocolate, not cocoa, but she's having some chocolate. She's having not coca, but yeah. Well, that's an exciting trip. It's definitely some place I'd like to go before they probably, well, I don't know if they'll shut it down, but they'll definitely, again, it's going to be harder to go visit. Because I know they're having a lot of problems with tourism, tourist damage to the sites up at Machu Picchu. Well, that's what I was told. I don't know. I mean, did you guys find a lot of tourists up there on Machu Picchu?
Tourists and tour guides.
Yeah,
What? Sorry.
between 6,000 and 7,500 tourists per day are visiting Machu Picchu in and of itself, and it's a factory. It's a mission. It's their bread and butter. They treat tourists well. There, we never felt.
Does it feel does it feel crowded with tourists though?
You're aware of people, there are lines, it's well managed, it's well orchestrated.
No, good.
It's like being at Disney, there are lines, but it's well managed and it's a sight to behold.
Gotcha. Wow.
Yeah, and their seasons are opposite. So it's, south of the equator. So they were leaving their winter going into spring. You were there at the start of the spring, so it was not the summer or the winter holiday rush. We're there, if you plan your time right, but just be aware. And even when you flush the toilet goes the opposite direction.
All right. All right. I get it. It's Southern Hemisphere stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad you're back safe and we're glad you got to enjoy that that wonder of the world.
Yes, but-
Human wonder.
Thank you. Thank you for asking us about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we didn't have class last week because we had a couple of guests from the kibbutz movement. We had a lot of people that watched that have seen it. And we're trying to figure out ways, obviously, to help Israel right now. Israel really has had some pretty miraculous things that they've pulled off in the last few days. But again, there's a fear that this war is going to open up and start being very hard on the Israelis. In the north, it's already been hard, but that it could get harder. And that's obviously something we're worried about. We're worried about people attacking Israel during the holidays as they did last year, because the October 7th attack happened on Simchat Torah. So I think, every holiday, and of course, Israel was attacked on Yom Kippur. So I think a lot of people are worried that the holidays are a heightened time. So definitely thinking about it right now. And so last week we had that. Next Wednesday, we don't have class because it's Rosh Hashanah. So we have a lot of stuff happening in the next few weeks. The following Wednesday we will, because it'll be the Wednesday between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but we'll be on our way. And somewhere in that point, 2 days before that, October 7th, we'll be having a rally and vigil for October 7th here in the city of Santa Clarita. But we're working on where that will be because the city did not want to have it in front of City Hall. So it's probably going to be at the park in front of Real Life Church over at Bridgeport. There's a park there that they asked us to use, because I said I wanted to do it close to the city center, but they didn't want us to do it right in front of City Hall. Yes, Mike. Yeah. Yeah, tomorrow night.
But also, something else that goes on.
There's Krav Maga. The Krav, yeah. Oh, the eating group. Yeah. Yeah. So everyone's going to be here tomorrow night. It's going to be a busy time tomorrow night at the temple. We have a lot of stuff going on. But Friday night, we'll have a special Slichot service, which will be streaming with Rick and Addie, a special Friday night. So there's a lot of good stuff coming. I don't know. Not a Slichot, pre-high holiday style service to get us into the mood of high holidays. It's a very old tradition. So that's going to be Friday night. So yeah, a lot of stuff coming up as we're getting ready for the holidays. Trying to be in the right frame of mind. It's tough right now, but well, it's tough to be in any other frame of mind other than thinking about what's going on in Israel. But the first thing I do when I wake up, the last thing I do before I go to sleep is check the news. Yeah. Well, I don't read that news. I read the Jerusalem Post. Yeah. Honestly, that's all I read. I read it right when I get, and that's not true. I read other stuff too, but that's the thing that I read first. Yeah. It's very straightforward. It's not a lot of, I know it's not, some people say it's slanted. I don't think it is. And some people say it moved to the right, 15, 20 years ago. But anyways, I think that tonight we're going to talk about prayers and what kind of prayers. We're not really prayers we're supposed to say and prayers we're really not supposed to say. We're actually going to see the rabbis kind of talk about things we shouldn't do and when we're praying, which is an interesting thing because you think, didn't the rabbis say we're supposed to be extemporaneous and kind of pray from the heart? But some of those prayers sometimes kind of come out maybe not right. And especially when they're heard by other people, maybe there's something going on here. So there is definitely some direction given here. So I would, as I kind of title this, the proper way to pray or proper prayers. So, so the Mishnah here, it says, speaks of certain innovations in the prayer formula that warrant the silencing of communal prayer leader who attempts to introduce them in his prayers, as their content tends towards heresy. So let's talk about, or let's see what that is, because what could they be saying? That's a problem. So again, a lot of this has to do with now saying it out loud, but of course, like, it's also, should you really be saying a prayer like this silently as well? But here's one that we would say, well, here's one that they're going to pick apart. So here we go. One who, that, by the way, was the commentary. Here's the actual text from the Talmud. One who recites in his supplication, just as your mercy is extended to a bird's nest, as you have commanded us to send away the mother before taking her chicks or eggs. That's a mitzvah in Deuteronomy, right? You're not supposed to kill a mother with her eggs. I mean, it's a law in the Torah, right? So the prayer is actually one who recites, your mercy is extended to the bird's nest, and then says, extend your mercy to us, and one who recites, may your name be mentioned with the good, or one who recites, we give thanks, they silence him. So these are things that they don't want to hear people say in their prayers. And let's find out why. Well, you already heard a little bit that it's heresy. By the way, does anyone, well, I was going to say, you want to guess, but let's look at the Gemara. So that's what the Mishnah says. That's the text from the Mishnah. And now the Gemara commentary follows. Our Mishnah cited 3 instances where the communal prayer leader is silenced. The Gemara clarifies. Granted, they silence one who repeats, we give thanks, as it appears like he is acknowledging and praying to 2 authorities. So it started with the last part, which is if you say modim, modim, if you say it twice, they're saying, maybe it looks like you're saying it to 2 people. You can guess that maybe that was specifically either God and one of the holy angels, which is something that started seeping in, and the Talmud kind of talks about in other places where it's God and Metatron, who's the head angel, or it's God and Jesus. Not the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, but maybe just the Father and the Son. Because if you think about it, most prayers, especially prayers that are not Catholic prayers, you'll hear people invoke God or Jesus. They don't often, at least in the non-Catholic situations, necessarily invoke the Holy Spirit, but they will invoke God and Jesus. So maybe what we're talking about here is heresy that's seeping into Judaism at the time, which is, again, people who are recognizing 2 authorities. So they started with that. So that's possible. We don't know that for sure. By the 2 authorities, it may be God and Jesus. Could be, again, God and Metatron, which we've seen in other places in the Talmud that the rabbis were concerned with, that people were invoking other things besides just God when they were praying. Not necessarily, right? Because it doesn't say how early this was. And remember, some of the Mishnah wasn't finished until 200, the Common Era. So that's 100 years. Yeah, so that's 100 years after. So it could have been in that 100 years after Jesus. But again, it also might be, well, people started doing that before Jesus with Metatron or with other angels, and now they're kind of doing it for Jesus. So it could be that Judaism introduced that type of potential problem by acknowledging something besides God. Something's besides God. Yeah. We haven't read it in a while, but we've read it before. So it does, because it's Greek and it sounds like it's like from Transformers or something. It is a Greek word, and it was the highest angel was referred to in the Talmud as Metatron. Again, is that Michael? Is that one of the other? Well, look, later on, maybe some of the early Jewish Christians said, well, that's Jesus. That was always Jesus. And Jesus came down into the earth. Metatron came down in the earth and became Jesus and then went back up. It's possible that it's possible that people believe that. Yes.
Could it also be that just exaggerated appreciation, we give things.
Yes.
We give thanks.
Yes. And so people would say, come on, maybe it's just, you just are being ecstatic, you're being happy. So they are going to say that. So they said, maybe it appears like, and then they didn't mean it, but we'll get to that. And then it says, and granted, they also silence one who says, may your name be mentioned with the good, as clearly he is thanking God only for the good and not for the bad. And we learned in the Mishnah, one is required to bless God for the bad, just as he blesses him for the good. That's what she just said. She literally just said that. Joyce literally just said those words. So this is something that we also learn in the discussions about Jewish prayer and to some extent Jewish philosophy, which is we can't just thank God for good things. Now, do we really thank God for when something bad happens to us? But we recognize that God is always with us. God isn't not with us during the bad times, right? And so if God isn't there, then are there really times when God isn't there? And so if we say that, you're almost leaving it open for there to be another power. You're almost saying if God isn't there for some of the time, what is there? And so that's where, if you say the bad things are created by whatever, Satan or the Antichrist or whatever you're going to say, then you got a problem, because now you're putting powers into other entities besides God. And so Judaism really had an issue with that, because before Christianity started going down that road, Judaism was going down that road, and Judaism had hit that road by coming into contact with the Persians, who had a situation of dualism where they prayed to the good God, Ahura Mazda, but there was also the bad side, the dark side. And that's, of course, the mythology that's the underpinning towards, of course, Star Wars. But that Gnostic dualism is was part of the Zoroastrian faith, and Judaism dealt with it for hundreds of years and said, that's not our faith. But did it have an effect on Judaism over years? Yeah. You can't sit in a community for hundreds of years and not get some of that stuff from them. So they did. How long did it take Jews to give gifts on Hanukkah? It didn't take that long, right? Hey, Christmas gifts. Hey, let's Hanukkah gifts. We'll do a Hanukkah gift. We'll do it 8 nights. We interpreted it. Why? When there was no gifts for Hanukkah. Ask your dad. Your dad would have told you there's no gifts. No gifts. In a generation, giving gifts at Hanukkah became a thing. One generation. So, yeah. It took one generation. It wasn't like, it didn't take hundreds of years for it to seep in. It's all of a sudden, if you tell kids, what do you do at Hanukkah? We give gifts. Like, it became a thing. So there's cultural influences that we pick up, and especially if, that we're surrounded by it, it's very hard not to be influenced by it. And so Jews got influenced by that dualism. And that's why when we talk about two powers, is there two powers? Is there a junior and a senior power over both sides? Gets to be, it gets to be complicated, and it opens it up to non-monotheistic traditions, which Judaism had been fighting for, and finally seemed like they had it, and then kind of now is fighting for it again. So this is what the rabbis are dealing with when they talk about this. So they said, okay, we can kind of see the modim. We don't want to say repetitive stuff like that, maybe, because someone will perceive it. Not that, again, as Joyce says, hey, just saying a good thing twice. But what's this thing about the birds then? And we see when we see the thing about, only saying God's good. Well, what's this thing about a bird's nest? Why can't you say, God, your mercy is like a bird's nest? What's wrong? What's the problem there? Why do we silence him there? And here's the reason. Two Amoraim in Eretz Yisrael. So again, the rabbis who are quoted in the Gemara are called Amoraim. They're the rabbis, like the Tanaim, that are the rabbis of the Mishnah. Amoraim are the later rabbis, the rabbis in the Gemara. So two of them in Eretz Yisrael disputed this question. Rabbi Yossi bar Avin and Rabbi Yossi bar Zavida, one said that this is because he engenders jealousy amongst God's creation, as it appears as though he's protesting the fact that God favored one creature over all the others. So if you say birds, God shows mercy to the birds, what about everything else? You're just saying God shows mercy to birds? That's kind of limiting, right? That's not really, and that's going to say, God, you don't care about the other animals. But the other rabbi said, and the other one said, it's because he transformed the attributes of the Holy One, blessed be he, into expressions of mercy when they are nothing but decrees of the king that must be fulfilled without inquiring into the reasons behind them. And so the second reason is the thing about the birds, that's not a mercy thing. That has nothing to do with mercy. That's not mercy. That's the rule. It's not mercy. God said it, and that's why you do it. You don't do it because, oh, God wants you to be merciful. You do it because God told you to do it. It's the law. So don't say it's mercy. It's not. It's the law. So again, these are the difference of opinions on why we don't say, God, your mercy is expressed through the bird's nest, the law of the bird's nest. Okay, so that's not it. The Gemara relates that a particular individual descended before the ark as prayer leader in the presence of Rabbah and said in his prayers, "You have shown mercy to the bird's nest. Now have mercy and pity upon us." Rabbah said, "How much does this Torah scholar know how to appease the Lord, his master?" Abaye said to him, "Didn't we learn in the Mishnah that they silence him?" So this guy actually gets up. There's a prayer leader, a cantor, if you will, who gets up and actually says those words. And Rabbah, one of the rabbis, says, "Oh, that's so beautiful." And the other guy says, "You're not supposed to say that. It's in the Mishnah. You're not supposed to." So, one says, "Oh, that's a great way to appease God." And the other says, "No, you're not supposed to say that." The Gemara explains, and Rabbah too held in accordance with his Mishnah, but merely acted this way because he wanted to hone Abaye's intellect. Rabbah did not make his statement to praise the scholar, but simply to test his nephew Abaye and to encourage him to articulate what he knows. So they said, no, Rabbah knew. He just wanted to see if Abaye would answer. So that's their answer. But so they don't want there to be differences of opinion on whether you can say that or not. But now they're going to get into, they're arguing about the prayer. They're arguing about whether you're really allowed to say certain things in prayers. That's what they're arguing about. But they're saying, hey, look, is there really a basis for this stuff? Is it really something? And they actually kind of are saying, do we tolerate this? Do we allow this to happen? And again, the issue might be when it's the person who's leading the prayer. You and I might say this in our heads, but when we're leading people in prayer, we got to be really careful with what we say. We don't want to encourage people to pray in the wrong way. And here's some other examples. With regards to additions to prayers formulated by the sages, the Gemara relates a particular individual descended before the ark, another leader, as prayer leader in the presence of Rabbi Hanina. He extended his prayer and said, "God, the great almighty, the great mighty, awesome, powerful, mighty, awe-inspiring, strong, fearless, steadfast, and honored." So normally, we say the Amidah, and we say Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, V'Hanorah. Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, V'Hanorah. But this guy said, V'Hadir, V'Ha'yezuz, V'Ha'yira'u, V'Chazak, 6 more things to it. Rabbi Hanina waited for him until he completed his prayer. When he finished, Rabbi Hanina asked him, have you concluded all of the praises of your master? Right? Why do I need all this superfluous praise? Even these 3 praises that we recite, Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, V'Hanorah, had Moses our teacher not said them in the Torah, and had not the members of the Great Assembly not come and incorporated them into the Amidah, we would not be permitted to recite them. And you went on and recited all of these. You went beyond it. So we say Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, V'Hanorah. Why? Well, because they're in the Torah, and then the rabbis decide, or the men of the Great Assembly, and then their predecessors, the rabbis' precursors, said, well, that's what we say, because that's in the Bible, and that's cool. That's what we're supposed to say. But you went on and on. And do you really think that those are the only great things about God? Are those the only ways? You actually screwed up by trying to add to God's stuff because it's comparable to a king who possessed many thousands of gold dinars, yet they were praising him for the silver ones. Isn't that deprecatory? Deprecatory. All of these praises we could possibly lavish upon the Lord are nothing but a few silver dinars relative to the thousands of gold dinars. Reciting a litany of praise does not enhance God's honor. And so what they're saying is, talking about what we think, or saying out loud, what are God's many qualities, we're incapable of saying everything if we try to start talking about how great God is, we come up short. Do you understand? So if we say, and he said, it's like you talk about a really rich king. Look at all the thousands of dollars he has. No, he has millions of dollars. You going around saying he has thousands of dollars makes him look poor. He's got billions of dollars. He doesn't have thousands of dollars. And that's what they just said. Saying these things about God, even if you're trying to make them better, they're not going to approach God's correct. And it's even more. Yes. Yes. No, they weren't. The rabbis weren't prayer leaders. Yes. Yes. The rabbis did not lead prayer. They composed the prayers. The early rabbis composed them, but they didn't get up and lead them. Those were prayer leaders. We call them shaliach tzibors, people who are sent to represent the community essentially in prayer. So when a person gets up there and represents the people in prayer, hello, they're representing rabbis were not prayer leaders. The cantors were, and the rabbis very rarely spoke in the synagogue. Yeah. And that was the important thing in the shul. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Finished, Rabbi Hanina asked him, have you concluded all your praises of your master? Why not of our master, right? And then,
Well, because he's making him feel like he's making him feel stupid. Well, he's not making him feel stupid, but he's kind of saying sarcastically, snarkily, really? Are you done? Are you done?
about me.
No, I know what you're saying. He's talking about he's saying it about it's as if God is saying, why do I need all this support,
I understand that, right?
So he's saying, look, when we say the Amidah and we say Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, V'Hanorah, like, how do we get off even saying that? We shouldn't be saying that, but we say it because we were given permission to say it. We were told to say it by Moses and by the people who came before us who incorporated them into our prayers. So we wouldn't say that. So it's a very interesting thing. It's like, how do you approach God? You approach God almost with this sense of humility that, like, I can't possibly put your greatness into words, which is why when the rabbis wrote a prayer that we know they wrote, because it's written in Aramaic, it's called the Kaddish, and this is the Hatzi Kaddish, but it's also in the Mourner's Kaddish. It's in every Kaddish. We say, let the glory of God be extolled. Let his great name be hallowed in the world. This is all Yikadal, Yikadash, the same word, Gadal, the Kadosh, holy. But then we say, God is beyond all praises, songs, and adorations that we can utter. It is the Holy One, right? Is the Holy One, the Blessed One, whom yet we glorify, honor, and exalt. And so we say those words. We say, hey, we try, but we acknowledge, as the Kaddish does, we can't possibly say these things because God is beyond our words. God's beyond our ability to really put into human words, but yet we try. And so that concept of God is above that, God is beyond it, yet we try, right? We try, is the concept behind, again, the rabbis wrote the Kaddish, and there is this understanding that this is a prayer of people, right? This is not words from the Torah. They knew that, and they knew that they essentially are putting their mark on the same time that they're writing the Talmud. They're putting in their words what we just read, which is, you know what? We can't possibly put into words the things that we really want to say, or like in our human expression, we can't do it, which is why we get to this version that we've been doing with Rick and Annie of Beyond, right? This is the translation of the Hatzi Kaddish, which I like because to some extent it says in the title, Beyond, though you are far beyond the sweetest songs we could ever sing. But we say them anyways, right? We say them, we try to say them, but we recognize that we're going to fall short. But we have to say that we have to acknowledge that we're falling short. It's that kind of humility that we enter into in our prayers, which reminds us that we do our best, but it's impossible for us to really comprehend God. And it's that kind of humility where we go, hey, I know exactly how to describe God. And there's that sense of, do we really know? Come on. Can you really know God? And so there's that humility that we're especially supposed to have at this time of year at the high holidays, where we go, there's things beyond us. And we're going to get to that right now. We're going to get to the beyond us business. But look, it's a tough one because prayer is our attempt to talk to God. It's our attempt to try to say from our hearts what we're going to do, but what we believe, what we feel in our hearts. But it's especially hard when we say the prayers out loud. But let's talk about what this really is, an expression. And this is a very famous line from the Talmud, and it's going to require a little bit of discussion and thought. So it says, tangentially, the Gemara cites an additional comment made by Rabbi Hanina. So Rabbi Hanina said that, and now here's something else he said concerning faith. Rabbi Hanina said, everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of heaven, which, again, could be understood this way. Man has free will to serve God or not. As it is stated, and now Israel, what does the Lord ask of you other than to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, and to serve the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, which we read in Deuteronomy, right after we read the Shema. I mean, it's in that same general section. The Lord asks to perform these matters because ultimately the choice is in his hands. Man has to perform. So that's the famous line. Everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of heaven. Meaning God doesn't control our ability or lack of ability to have faith. God doesn't do that. God doesn't intervene. God doesn't make us believe. That is a pretty heavy duty statement. And it's one that people have a hard time wrapping their head around. Maybe it's something that one could argue is the central question of faith in any, with anything, with regards to anything, which is that by nature, you can't be compelled to have faith in something, right? You can't have faith in something that you have no choice in the matter of. And God doesn't put us in a situation, according to the rabbis, I think it makes sense, where we have to have faith. One can make the argument further that the reason why our faith is again, by nature, uncertain is because it wouldn't, you can't have faith without doubt. So if you have complete certainty of something, it's no longer a matter of faith. You don't think about it, you just know it. And so it's not faith. There has to be doubt. And God, to some extent, can't make us have faith by giving us a constant sense of this is real and this is really part of something bigger, because then that's not faith anymore. So God created everything, and there's, to some extent, there's a system and there's a order to everything, and there's, to some extent, if you will, a fate for everything. There's a pre-wired thing in everything except for faith. Yeah. So God can't make us fear God. Can't. That's not part of the system. It's a pretty heavy duty line. It's one of the more famous lines about faith in Judaism that we have. Everything is in the hands of God except for faith in God. Which is interesting, because that's like, if you want to know the best expression of free will, it's faith. God's given us the free will to choose to have faith or not. And the rabbis believe this. I mean, the rabbis taught this, and we still teach it today. So we always look, there's people who've put it into more modern terms, which is also kind of cool, which is, again, you can't have faith without doubt. You literally it's no longer faith, so you don't call it faith. There was a famous line that some people say it's the same. It's the same side. It's different sides of the same coin. Faith and doubt are on the same. It's the same coin.
God created us all. Did God create the original man, Adam, and woman Eve perfect, but they made a choice?
Well, interestingly, the rabbis are not so. Look, when you read the story of Genesis flat out in the text and without commentary on it, there seems to be, I don't want to say, like, if we really read it without interpretation, there seems to be a really interesting understanding there that you can say that, and notice the rabbis have given us other, including one we read 2 weeks ago. Come on, were Adam and Eve not going to eat? I mean, it's a setup. God set them up. God put them in a situation where, come on, they were going to eat from it. And the rabbis go with that even further, which is again that famous story that we read, not famous story, that it wasn't famous, but to me it's the standout story, which is the king washes his son, puts him in nice clothes, puts some cologne on him, and then puts a money bag and sets him in front of the whorehouse. What's he going to do? That's the story we read 2 weeks ago, right? I told you it's a great line, which is, God's put us into the world with lots of stuff, which we're going to get in trouble on. The point is, when we look at that, do we say to God, hey, God, you kind of set us up a little bit? Or do we say, again, we know, God, that you've put a lot of stuff and we're going to screw up. And I think the Genesis story, rather than really, we don't read it as a story of original sin. We read it as really as a story, if there is an original problem, is that every human being, including, again, from the very beginning, we're going to make bad decisions. And the bad decision we made took us away from eternal life, but it also brought us into a world where we would procreate and create human existence that we've had for ever since we stepped out of the garden, which some could say is what separates us from the beasts, which is we have a consciousness, that we actually know when we've done things wrong. Because remember, it's not knowledge, it's knowledge of the difference between good and evil. And it was eating that fruit that gave them both, that opened their eyes. And so as much as, they were commanded not to do it, and there's a certain sense where the Bible seems to be saying, yeah, it was a setup, and God kind of had human beings with a choice, which is either follow the instructions and you're essentially like kept animals in a nice situation, or things are going to get rocky. You're going to have really wild lives, and you're going to live, and you're going to die, and you're going to have pain, and you're going to do everything else. But that's the choice that we made, or to some extent that God set up for us, which is my creations are going to be faced with an ongoing roller coaster of life. And I think that's really what I think the intention of the biblical story really was that. And the rabbis felt that too. They didn't put it in the way that I said it because, I understand that, I think they pretty much put it that way too. And I'm not saying what I'm saying because they said it. I think I'm saying it because I've read the story numerous times, and I come away with that story every time with, God, you kind of made it so that we were going to not be in the garden forever. That's the Adam and Eve story to some extent. And again, having God literally talking to them and giving instructions, they knew God was there. They didn't have to have really faith that God was there. They heard God every day. But that didn't stop them from screwing up, which also tells us that human beings are prone to screw up, even if we have God telling us what to do. Even if God's there, even if we know there's a God, we're still going to do the wrong thing. Another lesson from that story. Again, the question is, so what do we do now? Which is the rest of the Bible. And the rest of the Bible, almost every story is, okay, that didn't quite turn out the way we wanted to, but we're going to make the best of it and get to another stage. So to me, like the Bible, there's no happily ever after story in the Bible. We're going to get to the point of that, which is what happens when this is all over, when this existence is done. I promise you, we're going to get to that right now. But this is a big deal. Well, let's read a little bit more. The verse says, what does the Lord your God ask of you other than to have the fear of the Lord your God? The Gemara asks, is fear of heaven a minor matter that it can be presented as if God is not asking anything significant? Didn't Rabbi Hanina say in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, same guy, Didn't he say in the name of Shimon ben Yochai, the Holy One, blessed be, he has nothing in his treasury other than the treasure of fear of heaven? As it is stated, fear of the Lord is his treasure. So the Lord values and treasures fear of heaven over all else. The Gemara responds, indeed, for Moses, fear of heaven is a minor matter. As Rabbi Hanina stated, it is comparable to one who is asked for a large vessel, and he has one. It seems like a small vessel because he owns it. However, one who is asked for just a small vessel and he does not have one, it seems like a very large vessel. Therefore, Moses could say, what does the Lord your God ask of you other than to fear? Because in his eyes, it was a minor matter. And so Moses can have fear of God because he's Moses. But for most people, it's a big deal. And it's not an easy thing. And so remember that fearing God is not an easy thing. And it's not an easy thing for most people. Again, Moses seemed to have it, but of course, Moses is speaking to God all the time. And so that's how Rabbi Hanina would kind of interpret it. Yeah, it says in the Bible, fear of heaven is a treasure, but that's not what most of us have. Interestingly, again, it's not a minor. It's not a minor matter for Moses, but it is. It's not an. It's easy for Moses. It's not easy for us, and it's a good thing, but it's not an easy thing. So let's read this last part again about the modim part. We learned in the Mishnah, if one repeats, we give thanks, they silence him. Rabbi Zir said, one who repeats himself while reciting Shema and says, listen, Israel, is like one who says, we give thanks. The Gemara raises an objection. It was taught in a Braita, one who recites the Shema and repeats it is reprehensible. One may infer is reprehensible, but they do not silence him. The Gemara says, this is not difficult, right? Lo kasha. Where although it is reprehensible when one repeats the Shema, they do not silence him, is referring to one who recites and repeats each individual word as he says it. In doing so, he ruins the recitation of the Shema. However, this case, where Rabbi Zeira holds that one who repeats the Shema, they silence him, refers to one who recites and repeats an entire verse, as it appears that he is worshiping separate authorities. And so they have an issue with people repeating the Shema over and over and over again. What's interesting about this is, of course, we have a version of the Shema that we often do, where we repeat it over and over and over again. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai. And we say it again. There are people who will not do that version of the Shema. I mean, very religious people, because they say you're not supposed to recite the Shema. So they said, well, maybe it's saying Shema, Shema, Yisrael, Yisrael, that's the problem. He said, maybe saying Shema Yisrael and saying it again. They're saying, well, yeah, but maybe if you're saying the whole line again and again, that it's like you're saying it to more than one God. So they definitely are worried about that. They are worried about people that are going to be. Why? Because they are very concerned with people that are going outside of Jewish tradition, Jewish principles, because they're dealing with heresy at this time. They're dealing with people who are kind of trying to have foot in both camps, being both Jewish and Christian at the same time. And they have a problem with that because they feel that it's going to split up the Jewish community. If people follow these different traditions, they're going to move away from Jewish tradition. Or again, it's a way of sneaking in Christian beliefs into prayers. So they had an issue with it. I mean, I'm just telling you, this was an issue that people had with it. And I will tell you that it doesn't look. The fact that this was an issue thousands of years ago was because Christianity was a new religion at the time, and it was a question of whether, again, could you be both? But it's an issue even today, or maybe wasn't an issue for much of the last 2,000 years, but it's become an issue again today. I'll tell you why. And you're going to say, what are you talking about? I'll tell you what I'm talking about. Yeah. And so people say, now Shema is a prayer of the oneness of God. It's obvious, right? Everybody knows. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Right? It says so right in the prayer. Echad, God is one. Now here's what some people have said about the Shema, including, again, today's Jews for Jesus. It's going to show you. So you can say, what are you talking about? It says the Lord is one. It does, but it also says the Lord is our God, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. It says Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, right? The Lord is Adonai, right? It's Yud He Vav He, the name we don't pronounce of God, the Hashem word. Hashem Eloheinu is our God. Hashem Echad. Do you get it? God, or the Lord, God, the Lord. Said 3 times. So there are people who say that's an affirmation of the Trinity. I know. It's not apparent. I know it's not necessarily the most obvious reading of this, but the rabbis have done the same thing. They'll look at these things and say much crazier stuff as far as what's there. So the fact that somebody could say that, that's not absurd. The fact that somebody could interpret the Shema and say it's actually saying the Trinity. It says Adonai Eloheinu Adonai, the Lord God Lord. It says God 3 times. So I will tell you, this is still an issue. It's an issue today. So people will say it today. Yes. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
But said, hey, who cares? Well, God, I have to go to the Godfather training, right? And it was elementary.
Uh-huh.
So I got there late, about 8, after 8. And the teacher said, oh man, you got here late. I had such a bad day fasting all day. This is a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, why were you fasting all day? Well, I didn't say anything.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Look, there's people who've continued to blend Judaism and Christianity. I understand. So in a sense, people again have tried to figure out ways to, have both. But again, where that comes from is the fact that there are so many similarities. And what happens is that people, their intentions in some cases are good. Look, it's so funny that you bring this up today, Mike, because I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking about that same issue right now as I go into the high holidays, because it's one of the things that I'm going to speak about is that, look, people have good intentions. They have good intentions, but sometimes those good intentions don't come out good. Good intentions are, again, they come from a place where people are trying to do the right thing. And it's hard for people to, sometimes to understand that, but I think it's really important for us to understand. I think it's at least to be cognizant of it to the extent that, again, we still have to call it out when it doesn't work. But I don't want to get into it too much because I am probably this is probably one of the things I'm going to talk about, and you'll see why as it relates to some of the stuff that we're dealing with today.
The ceremony goes on. You just say what's comfortable for you to say.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was great.
Yeah.
He understood. This woman, not so much.
Well, we're going to skip ahead a little bit now to about another section, which I think might blow your minds too. Or at least having a question of how do we understand some stuff that is pretty important in Judaism and Christianity for that matter. We learned in the Mishnah that they say this about Rabbi Hanina, that Ben Dosa, that the indication whether or not his prayer was accepted was whether the prayer was fluent in his mouth as he recited it. The Gemara asks, from where are these matters? There's an accurate indication of whether or not a prayer is accepted derived. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, as the verse stated, the Lord that creates the expression of the lips, peace, peace to him that is far off, and to him that is near, and I will heal him. That's a line from Isaiah. It can be inferred from this that if speech of the lips is fluent speech is granted to one who prays, it indicates that his prayer on behalf of the ill has been accepted, and I will heal him. That person will be healed. So if your prayer comes out, it's very easy to say, it's a good sign that your prayer is going to be accepted. Okay? In conclusion of this discussion, the rabbi cites that which Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, that Rabbi Yochanan said with regard to the prayer, the reward of the righteous. All the prophets only prophesied in their prophecies of consolation with regard to one who values wisdom and therefore marries his daughter to a Torah scholar, and to one who conducts his business on behalf of a Torah scholar as well as to one who utilizes his wealth to benefit a Torah scholar in some other way. So the prophets were trying to help people, especially, again, Torah scholars, right? Good stuff for them. However, the prophets did not describe the extent of the reward for the Torah scholars themselves, whose reward is not quantifiable, as it is stated. And from old they have not heard, they have not lent an ear, nor eye has seen it. God, aside from you, will do for those who await him. And so one of the things that the Bible doesn't tell us is what is the reward for people who do good things? What is the reward for a Torah scholar? What is the reward for somebody who's doing the right thing, who knows the right thing and is doing the right thing? It doesn't say. It says you're supposed to have those things, that connection to Torah, but what happens? Well, because people want to know, hey, at the end of the day, well, so what do you think they're really talking about? Yeah, that's exactly what they're talking. So that's what we're going to get into right now. And Rabbi Chia bar Abba said that Rabbi Yochanan said, all the prophets only prophesied with regard to change in world order in the end of days, with regard to the days of the Messiah. However, with regard to the world to come, which exists on a higher level, it is stated, no eye has seen it, God, aside from you. And that's the line that's in Isaiah. When it says no eye has seen it, that's in regards to the world to come. Now, this is what I want to get to today.
Well, before you get there though.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting that they mentioned about the end of days.
Well, we're going to get to that. That's the thing, right? So we kind of talked about this before. We've talked about it a little bit. We kind of went around it. And this is an issue for both Judaism and Christianity, which developed at this time, because these ideas were the reward, if you will, that became a central part of both Judaism and Christianity. What happens if we do the right thing? When this is all said and done, when we're dead, when this is over, when this existence is done, what happens? And so they want, you just opened it up. And the line here, no one has seen it, God, aside from you, the rabbis are going to say that is with the world to come. And specifically, again, we're getting into this issue that I really wanted to get to, which is, and we've touched on it, wait a second. The world to come isn't the time of the Messiah? Isn't that the world to come? And so what the rabbis have just shown us, and it's something we've talked about and we've not really, we've touched on it, is that these are different things. The world to come is different than the days of the Messiah. It just said so. The days of the Messiah, that's something that the prophets talked about, but they didn't talk about heaven. They didn't talk about what happens in the world to come. So is the time of the Messiah not the world to come? It's two separate things. Yeah.
At a higher level.
Now here's the problem. Here's the problem for both Judaism and Christianity. That as our religions were developing, Rabbinic Judaism and Christianity, there was a lot of stuff happening. And we forget that because we want to say that like these people knew something that we don't know. The problem is they essentially are going to say, they just said it, we don't know what happens in the world to come. Trust me when I tell you, because they're going to say that. I'm not saying that for them. They're going to say that. I mean, they kind of said it right here with God, only God knows. But here's the problem. When Christianity started at that time, the idea of the Messianic age almost immediately became one of, okay, but is that what happens after we die? Aren't they the same thing? And for people who are not steeped in this, which the rabbis who are steeped in it still aren't really sure, because they just said they're different things. And did everybody believe that? I mean, it seems like it makes sense in maybe one way, but aren't people talking about aren't they talking about what happens in the future? Are they talking about what happens when we die? Or are they talking about 2,000 years later, it must be way in the future. Christians did not believe that the world to come or the Messianic age, or maybe both together, were going to happen 2,000 years later. How do we know that? Because they said so. They said that some of you will live to see this age. Yeah, and so did these people. I'm going to show you. Look.
Shooting star.
Look, the Gemara notes that the statement disagrees with the opinion of Shmuel. And as Shmuel said, the only difference between this world, and the days of the Messiah is with regard to servitude to foreign kingdoms. While in the days of the Messiah, Israel will be independent and free from enslavement to foreign powers, the world order will remain otherwise unchanged, as it is stated, for the poor shall not cease from the land, which indicates that the ways of the world are set and unchanging. So in Deuteronomy, it says the poor will always be there. So what's the difference? They're saying that in the world to come, or at least in the world to come of the Messiah, that time that we haven't gotten to yet, the only thing different from the world that they lived in, and to some extent, up until 1948, the world we lived in, was that we get to control our destiny. Shmuel basically is saying that the world is just like the world he lived in, the world we live in, or again, we lived in until we had sovereignty, is what's different is Jewish independence. We're no longer sovereign to other people. Somebody wrote that 2,000 years ago, folks. Somebody said that. They didn't say it out of nothing. The reason that it's there is because people believe that. They believed it. I also don't believe that they thought it would take 2,000 years for Jews to have sovereignty, to have control over themselves. But when they say that, folks, do you understand why today there are Orthodox Jews who say we live in the age of the Messiah. When Chabad people say that the last Rebbe who was born before Israel was established, because he was born in the early 1900s, and he lived through Israel's existence, and then they said that we live in the age of the Messiah, and they believed he was the Messiah. Why? Because he lived through this period of Israel, and if the Talmud says the only thing that's different is that we have our own sovereignty, then that happened. And I will tell you, I talk to people regularly from Chabad who believe we're in the Messianic age right now. The only question is, was the Rebbe the Messiah? I mean, they believe it. Why? Because we're no longer serving a foreign kingdom. So they literally believe that we live in the Messianic age. I mean, I've seen the material. I mean, I can show you the material. I mean, actually, I don't know if I can call it up right now, but this is the difference of, again, how we look at what the Messiah is in Judaism. At least the possibility that the really only difference is that the Messiah leads the Jewish people into freedom. I know it's strange because it goes against our idea of what the Messianic age is, but much of that was created because of our encounters with Christianity. Yeah, they still do it. The Chabad telethon, yeah.
See, now that you're saying, watching that telethon makes a lot more sense, they would say.
Yeah.
Why would they have the line in there for the Torah shall not cease?
Because when the Torah says that in Deuteronomy, it seems to be that when the Torah is saying that is that poverty stays with us all the time. Even in the Messianic age, there'll be poverty. The difference is that we won't have we will have power over ourselves.
This is Second Temple burned, Romans took over Israel, renamed it Syria, Palestine.
Yeah.
And so they thought they'd see it in their lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they also yeah. Yeah. And so the issue is if we're living in a time of the Messianic age, then it's not the look, the narrative exists, especially for people within Chabad, to say, yeah, things are going to be really dark before the Messianic age. And their answer is that was the Holocaust. So what's weird is that, like, you know this stuff, not because you're Jewish, but because you live in a Christian country. The apocalypse, if you will, the dark, horrible times that come before which we also, that's in other parts of the Talmud, it's other parts of Judaism at the time, and Christianity took that. I mean, it's in the book of Daniel. I mean, it's part of our teachings that things were going to get really bad before they get good. By the way, the reason that they said that was because the Jews who lived during the Roman era thought they were living through the apocalyptic age. They thought they were living in the worst possible situation that you could live with, which is you've burned our temple, you've killed 1.5 million of our people, you've crucified on every road outside of Jerusalem, you have crucified Jews, and you're taking our people into slavery. And it appears that this can't get much worse than this. And so they really believed it. And I believe the early Jewish Christians believed it too, because they were living through the same hell that the Jews were. And so I really believe that they thought it was going to happen soon, because they saw all of these terrible things that, again, written about in the book of Daniel, or and again, you see it in the book of Revelation, that you have this dark period of chaos and destruction, and then it's good. And for Jews who believe that we live in the days of the Messiah, that was the Holocaust. And so now we emerge into the Messianic era. And it fits the narrative for them that the Rebbe was the Moshiach. So that's where you get that. And you know, that's why the campaign of saying that he was, that he was the Moshiach is the reason that Schneerson, Rabbi Schneerson. So here, I mean, here's the stuff. I mean, you see these posters in New York. Moshiach is here. Just add in kindness and goodness, right? Long live the Rebbe King Messiah forever. We want Moshiach now. I mean, these things used to be everywhere. This is a billboard in New York. Messiah is here. It's in Israel too. I mean, you can see the versions of it. That's I'll show you the ones in Israel. I mean, he died. No. I think he lived he died about 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. Yeah. And again, I mean, well, he was the person who lived during that time, right? So these are the signs that you'll see in Israel. I don't have one here, but it says Yehi Melech Moshiach. Here it is.
Is it big in Israel too?
Yeah. Moshiach Khan. Moshiach is here. So look, not everybody here. That's not the shirt. Anyways, I mean, that's what happened. And yeah. Where? Here? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe it is. He met a lot of people. No, it's the guy who wrote this article, Yosef Abramowitz. No, but again, a lot of people were captivated by him. A lot of people thought he was, a very special person. But to call him the Moshiach, I mean, look, I'm not going to get it. I don't ask everybody in Chabad what their feeling is about. I just said I don't. I'm not joking when I say I don't want to get into that. I don't ask. No, look, he was a scholar. I mean, he studied, he supposedly had an amazing grasp of all this, of all these texts and understood everything. But, what was impressive, of course, about him was that, he inspired people, and people would meet with him and say, hey, what should I do? And he would give them advice or tell them, what to do, and give them $1 sometimes, they have to go give tzedakah. And people would, people, I'll give you 20. Just leave me alone. But anyways, people thought he was holy. And so they really believe it. I mean, there's a lot of people that really believe it. And again, partly because of the Holocaust, partly because he lived through that period. And so many Hasidic Jews were murdered. And theirs was one of the only movement of Hasidic dynasties that survived. Almost every other Hasidic dynasty was wiped out during the Holocaust. Entire communities. Yes, but there's 6 or 7. I mean, there were hundreds of Hasidic communities. So many of them that just got wiped. Every single person got wiped out from that community. So the ones who survived, and again, they've multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. I mean, Choni has a grandmother who's still alive, thank God, and she has like 500 or 600 great. Yeah, she has like 500 or 600 great grandkids. Yeah, for real. So that's what happens. I know that's what happens when you see this stuff. You say, like, how is this possible? So when people look at this and they say, how's it possible? Because United States and Israel and all of these things that have happened in the last 50, 60 years, 75 years now, people say these are miraculous times. Look, it's hard not to say it's miraculous times when Israel, blows up pagers and only, how's that not a miraculous time that we live in? I mean, literally, if people say, what is the modern version of a plague? The 10th plague, the death of the firstborn. What an outrageous thing that, can I believe that come on, they just pulled off a version of that.
This is a weird analogy. Don't give it to the sun. Give it a full stretch, but that's just an indication that had the Holocaust not happened, the answer is true.
There's a lot of ways to look at this. Yes, I don't like to look at the version of history that the Holocaust had to happen for Israel to exist, but there are people who do. And there's a thing you could say about that. And again, if you fit it into a narrative that the bad stuff has to happen before the good stuff can happen, that was the birth we call the birth pangs of the Messiah, was the pain that gives birth to the Messianic age. I'm just telling you and he didn't have any kids. So because he didn't have any sons, it ended the dynasty. So he had to be the Messiah because there was no rabbi that came after him. Now, there are other dynasties that have disappeared without there are other dynasties, I should say, they've disappeared. There's other dynasties that have continued after their Rebbe died. Yeah, there's the people who've continued other Hasidic. I mean, it's not easy to have a dynasty or to have a community without a Rebbe. So like the Satmar, who are some of them, not all of them, some of them are very anti-Israel. They have a Rebbe. They still have a Rebbe. The Satmar have a Rebbe. But yeah, does not. So the question of whether a movement, can continue, it has. There have been examples, but it's not easy. So there are people who lead Chabad now, but they're not part of the family. They're not the Schneerson. There's no Rebbe anymore. So that was another reason why people said he was the Messiah. So how do we even get to that? Because we have a line like this in the Talmud, that it is no different in the age of the Messianic era, other than we have our own control over our own future. Which again, based on that, are we not in the Messianic age? Are we not in the area in the age of the Messiah? Our ancestors couldn't have conceived that you could have a Messianic age necessarily without a Messiah. But they also didn't conceive of countries led by people who vote. So, look, it's a dangerous issue because, again, we have our idea of Messiah. Christians have their idea of Messiah, which are based on some of the same ideas. But this idea is an interesting one because, again, can there be poor people? Can there be problems that seem like they should end during the Messianic age? Yes, according to the Talmud. So that's a possibility. Okay. Interestingly, there are discussions about that, about whether he believed it or not. And so, there are the people who are diehard believers in this believe he's not really dead, that he's just in stasis with Bruce Lee and Elvis and everybody else who isn't really dead. But no, he's buried. There's a place where he's buried and people go to the place he's buried. Yeah. In Queens. But do people believe that he's not really dead? Look, I'm telling you, there's lots of people who are, you think, you talk to them and they seem normal, and then they might tell you that the Rebbe didn't really die. Look, I think people made fun of those people 25 years ago. They said, how can you go around saying that he's not dead? That's the same thing as what Christians said about Jesus. How is that any different? And so they felt uncomfortable with it, but they said, well, it's not, we're not worshiping him. We're not saying he's another power. We're saying he's the Messiah. So, well, again, let's get back to this other issue, which is there a difference between the Messianic age and the world to come, because that's what the rabbis seem to also be saying. Rabbi Achia bar Abba said it, and Rabbi Yochanan said, all of the prophets only prophesied the prophecies of consolation with regard to penitence, but with regard to the full-fledged righteous, it is stated, no eye has seen it, God, aside from you. So maybe they're talking about people who are going to heaven. You'll see what I'm saying about this. The Gemara notes that this statement disagrees with the opinion of Rabbi Abahu, who holds that penitents are superior to the righteous. Why? As Rabbi Abahu said, in the place where penitents stand, even the full-fledged righteous do not stand. As it is stated, peace upon him who is far and him who is near. Peace and greeting is extended first to him who is far, the penitent, and only thereafter peace to him who is near, the full-fledged righteous. And so here they're telling us something very important that we need to know, especially when we go into the high holidays. God loves the sinner, a sinner who repents, even more than the person who never sins. Why? Because, again, that person could have gone off the wrong direction, but he came back. And God loves those people. Okay? And that's a weird comment, but it's only there because of this statement that really don't know what happens to the full-fledged righteous. We don't know about those people. The people are going to heaven, or directly to heaven. And so now this discussion about doing bad things, and these are interesting discussions. But we're going to get back to this heaven issue. Well, it's going to lead to the heaven issue. This is all about heaven, really. Everything from now on has nothing to do with the Messianic age and has everything to do with heaven. How do we get to heaven? Rabbi Yochanan could have said to you, what is the meaning of him so far? This refers to a full-fledged righteous who is distant from an act of transgression from the outset and to whom peace is extended first. What is meant by him who is near? This refers to the penitent who was close to an act of transgression, but has now distanced himself from it, and to whom peace is extended only after it is extended to him who has been righteous from the outset. And so they said, well, maybe not really. Maybe the far is the person who is very far from sin, which is the full-fledged righteous person who is far from sin. And who is near, that's the person who is near transgression, but isn't doing it anymore, which are the penitent, the people who are still always close to falling off the wagon, if you will. And so what is this? Earlier, Rabbi Yochanan said there is a reward referred to in the verse, no eye has seen it. The Gemara asks, what is the reward about which it is said, no eye has seen it? Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, that is the wine that has been preserved in its grapes since the 6 days of creation, and which no eye has ever seen. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said, that is Eden, which no creature's eye has ever surveyed. And so here they're talking about the world to come. They're talking about the world that is not this world. It's not this world. And no eye has seen it. When the prophets are talking about that, the rabbis are saying, this is heaven. This is heaven. And again, what are examples of that? You know, the things that are in Eden. The things that are in Eden. Lest you will say, where was Adam the first man? Wasn't he there and didn't he survey Eden? The Gemara responds, Adam was only in the Garden of Eden, not in Eden itself. And this is what's interesting. And this is why, again, what's the difference between Eden and Gan Eden? The rabbis just gave us an interesting teaching, which is that when Adam and Eve, and this is, again, something that Glory was just talking about, Adam and Eve, that Adam and Eve were kind of, to some extent, thrown out of heaven. And the rabbis just gave us an interesting reading of this, which is they weren't in heaven. They were outside of heaven. They were in the garden. They were in the outside. They were hanging around the outside of heaven. They weren't in heaven. They were close to heaven. Gan Eden is the Garden of Eden. It's not Eden. And a garden is not the inside of the house. It's the outside. It's not bad to be in a garden. Gardens are pretty. Gardens are nice. It's really nice to be in the garden of a palace, but it's not the palace. And so now we have this understanding that no human, not even Adam and Eve, have ever been in the garden. I mean, in the Eden. They've been in the garden, but not in the Eden.
You know, it's interesting. Genesis 2,
Uh-huh.
clause 8,
Yes.
the Lord God planted a garden in Eden.
Yes. The rabbis didn't make it up. They knew what they were playing off of. We never think about that, right? We never think that the garden is in a place called Eden. It's in a place that was already Eden, and then they were put in a garden in Eden. Yes, that's what it says in Genesis. Now, again, the simple answer to it is that God put him in a special place. But the interesting thing is that at least the way you can read it literally, which is one of the ways the rabbis will play off of this stuff, is it says it's not Eden. It's a garden in Eden. And so that's what the rabbis are pointing out, right? A river, and look at this, lest you will say the garden and it is Eden, the two names describing the same place. That is not the case. As John just said, as the verse states, and a river went out from Eden to water the garden. Obviously, the garden exists on its own and Eden exists on its own. Or, yes, or it's the way that the closest that a living being can get. Could be heaven on earth, could be a place that a human being can go to, but it's not Eden. It's not the place.
Reference that book that
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, but that's not really the top level. That's not Eden. Now, correct, which is interesting because
you're not meant to, though. It's outside of Eden. It's a garden, or it's a garden near Eden.
I'm going to just tell you something you never noticed. Well, only because you never read this before. But the cemetery in North Hills, right? It's not called the Garden of Eden. It's called Eden Memorial. It's not called the Garden of Eden. It's called Eden Memorial. So they knew what they were doing. They knew the teaching on this, which is that when we say that someone is, and we use the phrase in Yiddish all the time, Gan Eden, which is heaven, the person's in Gan Eden. They're saying there's actually a difference. There's actually a difference between Eden and Gan Eden. And when we talk about someone really being in Eden, it means that they're in heaven. They're in the place with God. What was that? Oh, no, because they're basically saying we're putting our families into Eden. I don't look, that's not the only Eden. No, but that's not what? Not living people, dead. We visit it and we go to the Eden Memorial. We stand outside of it, but we're not. They're in Eden. They're in Eden. We're only visiting. No, but I mean, look, it's not called the Garden of Eden. There are cemeteries called the Garden of Eden. But I'm just saying in Hebrew, Gan Eden is the, it could be a place where people can be, but Eden is not a place, at least the rabbis have just told us, where,
I'll go. Is that a correct statement or is that not true?
no, yeah, I mean, no, the people who are not going, the people who are not going to Eden are, we don't like to speculate what's happening to those people. And more importantly, we don't focus on that in Judaism. We really don't. So, that is, again, you think we're splitting hairs, but the reality is that they intentionally did not call it, they did not call it that.
Never really says there's a hell.
Yeah, well,
Different levels.
look, the rabbis just told us that no person's ever gone there. And the prophets aren't really supposed to be talking about that. And they do that for a reason, which is that you're not supposed to be, we can't talk about it because we don't know. Yeah. And so they're saying that anybody who's talking about it is not doing it with rabbinic, prophetic, with God's permission. We're not. We're basically saying that this is not what we know, right? This is not the thing that we know.
Person that's brought back from hard stuff, maybe comes up with a story and not telling us the truth.
Well, look, the problem is that every person who's related a near-death experience who's come back, we don't know that they were, I mean, look, I'll only tell you that we understand that if a person, nobody's come back after years and years and come back and said, this is what heaven was like. So is there a place where people can exist in between the two places? Maybe, but nobody really, the understanding is to some extent that like you don't really.
You don't get to go until you're fully.
Yeah. And Judaism feels very comfortable with that, which is that there's not people who are going back and forth between Eden, between heaven and this planet. That when our time is to be separated, we're not going to come back. Did people who had near-death experiences 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago start telling people what they saw? And that's how we have visions of heaven? It's possible. I think it's very possible. But what we could say is that they're giving us a version of what they saw, but it's not necessarily, again, every like, can it really be expressed? Judaism kind of, that's where we get this idea that we can't really, we can't know. You can't experience heaven and come back to some extent. I mean, you can't, your eye can't see it. Now, can your spirit go there and you can come back? Maybe, but your eyes don't see it. Your eyes aren't going to behold it. Can your spirit do it? Maybe. Your spirit leaves the body and then comes back in, but your body is not going to see heaven, which is different from their belief about what happens when the Messiah comes. Because when the Messiah comes, it seems that you're in a body. There are people who are there when the Messiah is there, have a body and they die, and they are poor people. Now, is that the only teaching? No, which is why the rabbis say it as if they're saying, yeah, that's what he says. So there are other teachings about what happens when the Messiah comes. But there is an understanding, not the only understanding, but an understanding that the only difference when the Messiah comes is that we are in charge of our own stuff. Are there other teachings? Absolutely. Absolutely. And they are very close to the teachings that Christianity has about when the Messiah comes, because that's how Christianity developed those. They didn't develop it in a vacuum. But there are some that are this, and the some that are this are very close to the way we live today. People like it? Maybe. I don't know if people liked it 2,000 years ago. I don't know if people like it today, but there are people who believe it. And I just told you, there are people who believe it. They're walking around the streets right now and they believe that we live in the Messianic age or very close to it. So that is an important understanding of Jewish belief about the world to come. There might be a heaven that's separate from the Messianic age. Is it also possible that the two become blended? Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the idea that we get resurrected into our bodies when the Messiah comes, and that our spirits come back into this earth, into this world. We get a second chance at living in the world. We will live in a world. Well, it's an interesting idea that human beings, especially again, 2,000, 3,000 years ago, when there were only, 50 million people in the whole world, maybe 2,000 years ago, maybe about 50 million. Obviously, the world could have sustained 50 million people. It's sustaining over 7 billion today. So did they believe that their ancestors could have lived in their world with them? Yeah, because it still would have been under 7 billion people if you add up the generations. Look, they believed it because they had to combine these two different teachings, which are there's a messianic age and there's a world to come. Are the two different, or do the two eventually come back together? And one could say the idea that they come back together is based on this idea that there's no reason why we'd be in this world if this world didn't serve a purpose. And maybe this world's purpose is to eventually be populated with everybody who ever lived in a perfect body who now gets to enjoy this world. No, it's possible that again, that happens when the Messiah comes. And one of the things that he does is he establishes a temple. One could make the statement that in order for the Messiah to really be here, the temple has to be rebuilt.
Why have
Because we'd have to throw off the Dome of the Rock.
that spot? You know exactly that's the spot?
That's exactly the spot. There's no question that that's the spot. That we know of. The archaeology will tell us everybody knows that. I mean, that's not disputed. The Dome of the Rock is built right on top of where the temple is. We would say we don't have, look, I would argue that and I actually said it on our trip, I believe that one of the things that we can do is look at the fact that we don't have to build the temple in order for us to have this come about. Look, I only tell you this because I'm not far removed from Chabad on this. I'm not sure that we don't live in an age where our ancestors would have said, this is the Messianic age. This is the age that we prayed for, that we hoped would happen. I'm not so sure that we don't live in that time. My only difference is that I don't think we need to have a Messiah. But I'm American. And so I'm an American Jew who doesn't believe that there has to be a person that brings the Messiah, that we bring in a Messianic age. But for somebody who believes that there has to be a person in charge of it, then the guy has to be the king. Do you not understand that there are people who have that feeling about Netanyahu? Do you not understand that there are people who call him king and they say it in a positive way?
I've heard that.
So
They need people in all of us. It is just human nature. In times of strife, in times of difficulty, whether it's with a family or broader to a community, people want a strong leader, right? Now, it might not be the right leader. They want a strong leader. It doesn't have to be a authoritarian. But you know what I'm saying?
so
Maybe they're not confident of their own leadership.
So the problem is that the idea of Messiah is one of our version of it versus, again, our living with the specter and the shadow of Jesus being the Messiah. So our understanding of what a Messiah is has largely been put on us by Christianity. So the Jewish idea of Messiah, what you just read, is that the Messiah is a king and he helps us have our independence. Yeah, but so was David Ben-Gurion. So was Netanyahu, who's now been prime minister longer than David Ben-Gurion. So was, as many people were worried,
But the green.
when Theodore Herzl first started his stuff, there were people who said he was the Messiah. And he told them, I'm not the Messiah, but he understood why they said that. And people said to him, look, there were rabbis who came to him and said, look, I got a problem. I'm not sure that you're not the Messiah. And he said, I'm not the Messiah. He said, but you seem to like inhabit this kind of idea that he had. It was charismatic. He knew what he was doing when he dressed the way he did and cultivated the airs that he did. People said to him, I'm not sure. And he said, no, I'm not. He didn't proclaim himself the Messiah, but there were people who, there was a messianic fervor about him.
Because people want, they need.
Well, they need a person to inhabit that. I'm not a person who believes that because I'm an American. I think royalty is a stupid idea. It's my feeling. I hate it. My wife, she's gotten better. Now, she was never that bad, but she definitely does. She's an American now. Right.
Some people don't have that in them.
Yeah, but it's also for most of human history, there had to be a king. There had to be somebody who called the shots. America is the first country that said that doesn't have to be the case. That's the first time that people said, no, you don't have to have a king. So, or queen. You don't have, so I was raised that way, but most people were not raised that way. People who live in with a different frame of mind, they don't have an issue with it. And that's most of human history. Most of human history, they could have said, oh, I guess so. I mean, why not? About, I think they didn't understand it when they first came here, but I don't think it took them long to realize that there's a different situation. But they didn't come here because there wasn't a king. They came here because there was opportunity, because they knew they weren't going to get killed. I mean, those kinds of things, but I don't think they were drawn to the democratic system and said, oh, this is a great system. So some people, I mean, whether or not their political aspirations were to vote.
Comments, because that's what he understood.
Exactly.
The socialistic axis.
Which was a reaction to monarchy, the Romanov dynasty in Russia. Look, I'm just telling you, I don't think most people were politically motivated when they came here,
No.
but they loved it. And they loved this idea that there wasn't a king, and that felt, I think, comfortable for Jews. I think it felt more comfortable. Look, we knew that a king only rules with God's permission, right? The king always in the Bible has to be subservient to God. Yes, but that's Jewish tradition.
Right.
The king is subservient. It's not that the king is God's emissary here. God can make the king no longer a king. And so we see that in the book of Samuel, where Samuel says, the people want a king. And God says, well, give them a king. But it's clearly not ideal. It's not what they were supposed to do. So Jews, I think, always felt comfortable in the United States because there wasn't a king. But I don't think that was necessarily the reason we came here. But the feeling that a king could, in Judaism at least, be just a human being who does good things and bad things, that's David. That's every king that we read about. A lot of them are worse. A lot of them are more on the bad side, as we talk about on our Tuesday class. They were on the wrong side for the most of their lives, and most of the kings were not good kings. So the fact that a king could be a bad king, we had no issue with that. Our Messiah was going to be a king who hopefully did good things, but what did he do? At least according to some people, he gave us sovereignty again. And that's why maybe it was Herzl, maybe it was Ben Gurion, maybe it was Netanyahu. Anybody, well, he wasn't that involved in being in Israel, but look, I mean, if it's, then it might as well be Shelley Adelson or Bob Kraft or Arthur Blank. The people who are really rich. You're talking about really rich people.
It just took 30 years to happen.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, they were really rich people. Yes. Yeah.
And speaking on what Mike said, besides the Jew hatred in the 30s by the you know how I feel about it. I'm not gonna go crazy, but the limited immigration policy, right? Could have been partially, seen some counts, not a lot, because of the socialistic tendencies or the communistic tendencies. Some Jews, they were afraid that that was going to be a burden on our welfare system. That's what they thought coming.
That's what some people say, John.
I
I will tell you, it was anti-Semitism. It was not, it was Jew hatred. It was not, yeah, maybe they're communists, maybe they're socialists. They knew, the people who were honest about it knew how many of the Jews were socialists. They knew there were some, they knew there were some of the leaders were Jewish, but there were a lot of Jews who weren't political. They just didn't want Jews. They didn't want us to be, they just didn't want us to be here. And that's the bottom line. Yeah, when we talk about the Messiah and we talk about what the world could look like, it goes from, I think, pretty close to what we have now to an existence that is almost like heaven on earth. And then again, maybe at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because we're going to keep functioning like this. And then what really happens is after we die, we go into another existence. The Talmud gives us these pictures of what people believed. And it's interesting because it's not much different today. I mean, people have a variety of beliefs about what's going to happen in the future, whether we essentially, will evolve into something different, whether we're going to make heaven on this planet or whether we destroy it, I guess is the other possibility. Or again, whether it doesn't really matter because it's what happens in the next world that counts. I think that I have a feeling that we still only understand a little bit about the universe. And so I think, and time, and I think whatever you want to call it, when human beings understand more about our existence, a lot of this will make sense. And I think we only can grasp part of it. The question of how long it takes human beings to evolve to the point where they can understand this better, I don't know. Look, I don't know whether there's actually a heaven. I don't know whether I can't say for sure there is, but I do believe that it seems possible that, either there is another existence or we're getting to that other existence, in which case, even if we're not the ones who inhabit that other existence, our descendants will, which is part of us. So I'm not 100% sure whether it's in our, I don't know whether my ego wants my essence to be in heaven or whether I can wrap my head around the fact that human beings eventually become something bigger than they are right now.
Big Rabbi, when Lee was in the process of transitioning.
Yeah.
It looked peaceful and it looked as though he had a sense of peace and calm as to where he was going. And he was apparently seeing something ahead of him. as
Well-
peace descended over him.
I will tell you that, we talked about it already, which is there are different, the Talmud talked about it. We reread it, that there are different ways to exit the world. And the highest we talked about is the kiss, right? The kiss from God. So if they said the worst way to die, they said is like whooping cough, right? They said coughing and having that cough is the worst. And they said, but the best is God's kiss. So you remember that part, Mary? The kiss? Yeah. So when you see it, and Lee had one of those experiences where, again, we saw it. And so people who, I happened to see it because I was there at that moment. So when we see somebody exit this world with the kiss of God, clearly there's a peacefulness there that, makes us feel that at the very least, that we can exit this world with peace.
It left me in peace.
Yeah. So again, it just said in here, no creature's eye has ever surveyed it, right? No eye has seen it. There might be a level to this that we can only grasp part of it. We can only see the garden. But again, there might be some other existence that is the Eden itself. And I believe it. I can't prove it, but enough has led me to believe that there's another existence that's different than this one and more peaceful than this one. So whether we achieve it, whether it's achieved on, through human activity or human evolution, human experience, or whether it's there for us anyways, I'm not really sure. But I believe it exists. So, all right, folks, with that, we're hopefully, if we don't get to Eden tomorrow, we'll get at least into the garden. Yeah, I hope to see everybody at least in this existence next week. And we're praying for a good end to this year. Hope that it's going to be good. And we'll see you tomorrow night to sing if you want. A lot of stuff going on tomorrow. So it's good stuff. Take care, everybody. It's good to see you all. Take
Thank you.
care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Very good discussions.
Wow.
A lot to think about. I told you.